Alright, welcome back to the channel everyone. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I had a friend at a little social gathering that asked to learn how to play poker, and so this video is going to be for that. And yeah, let's just jump straight into it. So if you don't understand poker, poker is a game of chance but also skill. So very high level, every single player is dealt two cards. These are your whole cards, and these are not cards that are going to be revealed to everyone else. Your goal is to potentially take everyone else's money, and that's done through 4 rounds of betting. So there's the pre-flop, which means before any cards in the center are dealt, there's like a round of betting, and that's usually based off of the player's hands in terms of their strengths. And then there's the flop, which means the first 3 cards are dealt, and these 3 cards are community cards for the entire table. During the flop, this is going to be the time where the most action typically takes place because you have the most information. But there's also 2 rounds after. So there's the turn, which is the 4th card, and then there's the river, which is the 5th card. And so with these 5 cards in the center and your 2 cards, you're trying to make the best possible 5-card hand in the entire board. The winner takes all the earnings in the pot as well. So with these betting rounds, you have to match whatever the previous person bet. And so, for example, if someone ahead of you bet $50, then you would have to either do 50 minimum or raise it to, like, for example, like $100 or so. If you don't and you think that price is too expensive, then you have to fold. And folding means you're like out of the round, you don't do any more betting. So very high level, that's kind of how poker works. There is aspects of luck, there's aspects of chance, but the best players understand the probability and understand how to play the players. So let's dive into probabilities first. There's a lot of different metrics you could kind of learn. Like, for example, the chance of you getting pocket aces is 1 out of 220. The chance of you getting a pocket pair is what, like 13 over 220, which is maybe like 6, 7, 8%. And so there's those metrics. But the most important is going to be understanding your win condition and how you're supposed to win the game. So for example, if I have 2 pair in my hand, or sorry, like a pocket pair in my hand, like let's say pair fives or so. Most likely, if I get another 5 on the board, I'm going to be in a very good position to win the hand because trips is a pretty good hand. Obviously, it depends from hand to hand, but let's say that's like in this situation, if I get trips, I win the game, right? The first 3 cards are dealt on the flop, none of them are fives. So now you have to think like what the chance is to get a 5 on the turn in the river, and if you're willing to pay that much money to see those cards, because people are always going to be betting, and you're basically, if you put in money, you think that the probability of you getting more money back by a 5 landing is going to be higher than the probability of you losing money, which is like a 5 not coming and then you lose your money. And so the chance of a 5 in this case is going to be something called your outs. So your outs are the cards that you need to guarantee a win, right? And so if you have 2 5s in your hand, there's 4 5s in the deck, which means that there are 2 5s left, assuming that no one else has a 5, right? And if there's 2 cards left that are going to be dealt, the chance of that is you approximately how many outs you have times 4. So 2 times 4 is 8, which means that there's an 8% chance approximately that you'll get a 5 on the turn or the river. If for example, the turn is dealt and then the river shows and you're waiting for the river, then that chance goes down to 2x. So you have 2 cards, you have it times 2, which is around 4%. I think the actual number is like 5% or so, but that's kind of how the math works. Let's do a different situation where let's say you're looking for a straight. You have 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're looking for an 8 or a 3, right? There's 4 3s and 4 8s in the deck, and so that gives you 8 outs total, right? So now the turn, right? And you're trying to get it in the turn or the river. So 8 times 4 gives you 32. That's the percentage that you're going to be able to hit one of your outs and potentially win the game. So that's kind of the talk about probability. Obviously, I could go a little bit more in depth, but that's like kind of understanding the basic statistics, because you always want to be making game theory optimal plays, which means that in the long run, if you're making the same decision over and over again, you're going to come out ahead compared to not, right? It's very similar to if I offered you a coin flip and every single time it hit heads, it was I give you $5, but every single time it hit tails, you lose $10. Would you take it? Like, no. You might make some money ahead of time, right? Because just like that's how chance works. But in the long run, if you do that 100 times over, you're going to be losing a lot of money because the odds and probability just are not in your favor. So next thing is understanding ranges. So in poker, it's never about playing or trying to pick out what specific cards your opponent has. It's supposed to be understanding the range of cards that your opponent could have. So for example, in pre-flop, if your opponent is betting a lot of money, you could usually put them on a very tight range because it seems like their hand is strong. So it doesn't matter if they have pocket kings or pocket queens or pocket jacks. It just means that their hand is strong and you could put them in that range. Most likely, if they're betting a lot of money, they're not going to have a hand like maybe like 2-4 or something like that. Especially at a very large table where there's like 8 people playing, it's just a net negative play to be betting that much, especially when you have a weak hand. And so as the game progresses, you're going to get more information in terms of the type of hand that they might be playing. And so that's going to help narrow your range down into what they're looking for. So then you can make an informed decision as in terms of what outs they have, what cards they're looking for, like all those different types of things. Next thing is understanding positioning at the table. And this kind of goes into the point that poker is an information-based game. So poker is divided into rounds, like we kind of discussed that. And every single player kind of takes one turn. So if you're at the very end of a round, you have the most amount of information possible because everyone else acted before you. But for example, if you're first and there's 7 people behind you, then it's probably not the best to make a decision, especially the one that costs money, like betting, because you don't know if the people behind you are going to raise or potentially even go all in. Like if your hand's not good enough, you're just wasted money. So there's kind of an understanding of information in that sense. There's benefits and weaknesses to both. For example, the first to act is someone called under the gun, and the person that's under the gun usually set the stakes of the game, and they will determine how much money is going to be put into the pot very early on. And so a lot of people can kind of hide the strength of their hand by betting a lot under the gun, because most people would assume otherwise. Like if they're not betting, then they're kind of just weak. But you could hide your hand strength very effectively because you're the first to act, and everyone else knows the same principle, right? The last person to act has the most information possible. And so for example, if you're last to act, if the hand seems potentially playable, you could go in with like 7-5 and people won't really know because you have the most amount of information possible. Whereas it's a lot riskier to play worse hands earlier on. This kind of goes into another thing, which is understanding like positioning hand strength. So if someone is playing very tight, that means that their hand range is very limited and they're only playing the best hands possible. Whereas if someone is playing very loose, that means that they are playing a wide range of hands and they're calling or they're playing a lot more than they should be. Kind of the last thing to take a look at is understanding that poker, while is still just a game of probability and statistics, you also have to understand playing the player, right? If you're always playing game theory optimal, which is trying to make the best statistical decision, it's definitely like the right way to play. But the thing is, other players can take advantage of that fact as well, because if they know that you're going to fold if the percentage chance is like less than 10% or whatever, then they're just going to keep betting and then you're going to be losing out, right? And so playing the player is a very significant role. So if someone is playing very loose, you punish them by playing tighter. If someone's playing tight, you punish them by playing looser. It's kind of like a fluctuation, right? Because you want to get to a point where you're trying to take away as much money from the opponent as possible, and that's hiding the way that you play. If the enemy had perfect information on the way that you played, you would lose every single hand in existence, right? Because they basically know exactly what your hand is. But if you're able to mask how you're playing, your behavior, your strategy, and still kind of abide by like general like expected value principles, then you're going to be in a much better position, because then it's going to keep them guessing like, oh, is this guy bluffing or does this guy actually have the hand, right? The more you play with players, the more you're going to pick up on these types of things, especially their mannerisms, their behaviors. There's something called tells. Tells is like an understanding of if they have a good hand or if they have a bad hand, and it's usually like their physical form. So like if someone's like scratching their face, that might mean that they're nervous. If they're tapping their feet a lot, that also might mean that they're nervous. If they're not blinking as much, like all these different like physical things. But the more you play with people, the more you're going to understand how they play. And if you're playing at a very high level, you want to mask as much information about yourself as possible, because that's going to help you in the long run. But I hope this video is helpful. Definitely kind of out of what I typically post, but let me know if you want more content like this, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.